Hi, everybody. This is Steve Maggi from SMA Law Firm. Welcome to Building the Bridge. I have the honor of being with Charlotte Nytoft, a strategic export advisor helping European companies launch in the US. Thanks for joining us, Charlotte.
Yeah, you're most welcome, Steve. Thank you so very much for having me.
So we've both been in this game a long time, and we've seen a lot of mistakes made by European companies launching in the US. What are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen?
Sort of the most common pitfall that I have noticed that businesses are doing, and that is basically across industries, across export maturity, across business size, is basically the lack of understanding the size of the United States. That the United States is not one market; it's multiple markets, it's multiple segments. And that is simply what you need to understand when you go and launch your business on the United States market. So simply the size, and there is no such thing as one size fits everything in the United States. That is one of the common mistakes that I see European businesses do on the US market.
So do you mean that they're trying to conquer the entire US as opposed to saying, you know what, we can fill this specific void, we're in this specific niche, and geographically, maybe the best place for us might be Wisconsin or Idaho, or depending on what their vertical is and what they're trying to do, and not feel like they're failing because they're not in Silicon Valley or New York or some other huge startup network market, for example.
Yeah, that you hit it right on the spot there, Steve, because I think that is exactly what they are. You can say I think it's a mix of being actually exposed to the fact that you are utterly unfamiliar with the US market as a total. We always in Europe we always make fun of the Americans saying, yeah, don't understand the geography of the European market. You think Amsterdam is somehow connected to Denmark, which is not, and so on and so forth. But when we arrive in the United States as Europeans, we are overwhelmed by the size. We tend to think that we understand the US market as a concept, but we do not. And we tend to actually focus our efforts on what we know, the knowns, and we know sort of the borders of the United States. We know where New York is and Chicago and so on and so forth, but actually dare to venture out in less familiar territories, that can be pretty scary for a European company.
There's a really strong parallel there if you think about compare the US as if the States were European countries and Europe, right? Because what I've seen with a lot of the Danish companies is they'll start and they'll conquer Denmark, then they'll go, across the way to Sweden, and then they'll grow a little bit more in Scandinavia. Then maybe they'll look at other countries, the UK or other parts of Europe, and then they'll start thinking about Asia or the United States, for example. That's kind of what Europeans need to do when they're thinking about the US, right? Is think about the region first because it's so hyper specific. There are certain brands that will be very successful in certain areas and not at all in other areas. To think of it that way, right? Break it down more.
Exactly. As break it down into smaller segments. And ultimately it's basically about understanding your customer. What is the driver? How can you actually identify where your business and your products and your service is solving a unique problem for the customers in United States? And that actually is across both business to consumer and business to business products and solution. It's basically the same. But if you, for instance, if we stay in the business to business world, if you have a technology that is solving a specific task, you also need to really understand the size of the United States market. Obviously, we would all like to deliver some solution for Chicago or New York or Los Angeles. That's obviously one of the ultimate goals. But simply the sheer size is mostly not really manageable for a European company. You need to go and test out your products on smaller markets and really understand where your technology has a unique value proposition to the US consumer in the US context. So yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that I found too that it's how you measure success? So thinking that if you haven't conquered the entire country, or an entire region means that you're a failure, versus I have a Danish client whose goal was to get 1% market share in that vertical that they were working. And when they got to 1% market share, they were selling their company for upwards of $20 million. So that's a huge success in my mind, to start almost from scratch and get to that point where you can sell a company. But if they had been thinking, I want to get 50% market share and I'm not going to stop until then they probably would have failed, right? So
exactly, yeah, exactly. But I'm always a little cautious about the companies that say, yeah, if I just could, because you have these Excel sheets and you say, if I just could get, there's like 330 million people in the United States, and if I could just get like 0.75% of the market, I would be happy. But that's simply the most companies that have this approach fail on the US market, because they're focusing way too broad, and you really need to narrow down and understand. It's not enough that it's a huge market from a population standpoint of view, because everywhere you look in the United States, there's a huge market. So you really need to narrow down and pinpoint and understand the exact vertical, the exact side of the business where you can make a difference, and really understand your customer. Because if you just come to the United States with the expression, yeah, if I just could get 0.75% of the US market, I would be happy, because that has for me always been a sign that they're not really, you can say, coachable in understanding the drivers on the market that are, and the business case on the market, which most likely will be entirely different from their European business proposition. So yeah, absolutely.
So for those European companies that are starting to think about doing business in the US, how do they get in touch with you to plan things, to strategize, to do that market research, and to avoid those pitfalls?
They will best get in touch with me by either reaching out on LinkedIn, or actually writing me an email at Charlotte at exportacrossthepond.com. That is where I am keeping all my work on export related businesses. So that would be a good way to get in touch with me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your knowledge and for your time today.
Thank you very much, Steve.